Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're not going to be talking about the other half of my guys. We're going to be talking about my top 12 running backs for the 2021 fantasy season. I'm going to be specifically talking redraft. I actually don't know if I'll get through all 12 today because it's a pretty lengthy list. If I have to cut off halfway through, I certainly will. So let's jump right in. Number one, if you couldn't guess, it's Christian McCaffrey. I'm not going to overcomplicate this. I'm not going to overthink the injury. Don't think it's going to have a long-term effect on him. I think he'll be 100% once the season rolls around. He is the clear-cut number one. When he played last year, he was ridiculously elite. He was the RB53 in terms of where he finished, but was the RB1 in points per game with 27.3 for half PPR, 5 points per game higher than the RB2. In 2019, when he was the RB1 by like 120 points, he averaged 25.8 points per game. So in the 3 games he played this year, he was showing improvement over an already incredible year. There's nothing that's going to show me or disprove the fact that he's the RB1 when healthy. He produces at an elite level week in, week out. Unless he's playing the Buccaneers, that'll put up like 10, but even then that's not that bad because he's giving you 30 every other week. If he gets moved to Houston by chance in a Deshaun Watson move, then we reevaluate this ranking. Then we bump him down a little bit because David Johnson's going to steal all of his work. But for right now, Christian McCaffrey is sitting atop the throne as the RB1 where he belongs. Speaking of thrones, at the number 2 running back for next year, we have Derrick Henry. I feel like we haven't really acknowledged the fact that Derrick Henry ran for 2,000 yards. Like, it kind of happened. We were all, like, worrying, like, oh, my God, is it going to happen? And then it happened, and no one really cared. That's a ridiculous accomplishment, especially in this day and age where the running back, at least just a pure ground pounder, is kind of becoming a lost art. But Derrick Henry, yet again, did his thing this year, finishing as the RB2 on the year, despite being a pretty much non-factor through the air with just 19 receptions. In terms of half PPR points per game, he was the RB3, below Christian McCaffrey and I believe Alvin Kamara. One of these years, Derrick Henry will have a decline. He's getting a little bit older every year, getting a little bit more wear and tear, but I'm not going to bet that he's going to decline this year, and I'm never going to be the guy that tries to bet on a decline intentionally. For me, I see no end in sight. He'll be like 40, putting up 600 rushing yards over weeks 12 through 17. I just don't see him not doing that. This year, he had 17 touchdowns, which is actually a slight downtick from last year, which he had 18. This is consistent. This is what he does. I'm not going to call for some bullshit touchdown regression here because he puts up a high number in the touchdown category. There could be some red flags. Like I said, age, wear, and tear could inevitably catch up to him. Not sure when. But also the loss of Arthur Smith. That offense ran through him with him. I don't think that changed without Arthur Smith, but it's something slight to keep an eye on. I think Derrick Henry is and will be the focal point of this offense, but maybe it runs a little bit more through A.J. Brown next year. We are yet to see. He led the league this year in breakaway runs, evaded tackles, was 8th in juke rate, which is more or less an elusiveness rating, led the league in carries, was 2nd in the league in red zone touches despite Ryan Tannehill stealing about 5 to 6 through both rushes and passes within the 10-yard line. So he would have had over 20 and improved on last year's ridiculous number of 18. He was 1st in yards created, which is a stat that shows how many yards you have after the first evaded tackle with 997. He almost hit 1,000 yards purely after the first tackle attempt, exclusively on the ground, and he would have been one of, I think, 6 running backs to hit 1,000 yards. Overall, Derrick Henry, you know what you're getting. Absolute beast on the ground, non-factor through the air, but that doesn't matter when you're putting up 120 yards and 2 touchdowns every week. Number 3, Dalvin Cook is the RB3 for me going into next year on my rankings. I had a small debate with who to put here. I actually slid a guy quite a ways down my ratings after getting through 4 and 5. We'll get to him later. But for one, I think he has relatively low external worry, especially compared to the guy I moved down to 6. Although the concern is there, it's his injuries. He has an injury history. Although the past 2 years he has played 14 games, and I know when you get a first-round pick, you're going to want those 16 games of elite production, but I think he's such a productive and electric player on the field that it can slide. He was the RB3 this year, despite, like I said, only playing 14 games, and the RB2 in points per game. He was 2nd in the league in targets, and the only running back to get over 250 carries and 50 targets, so he is a bit of a unique player in terms of accumulating volume and how he can do it through both the ground and the air. He managed to produce at such a high level with the 42nd ranked run block efficiency as per Player Profiler, and will likely continue to do so even though the Vikings' offensive line is nothing short of a dumpster fire. The offense was passed down from Gary Kubiak to his son, so although the coaches changed, it's literally just a familial pass. I forgot what the fucking word is when you just give jobs to your family members even though they kind of don't deserve it. It'll come back to me at some point. Long story short, system in Minnesota, not going to change. Just a different first name, last name staying the same. He had 17 total touchdowns this year. Only one receiving, though, although it felt like he was pretty productive through the air and scored a lot more than that. I feel like I can always remember him busting at a 30-yard screen whenever I played against him, and then pretty much every week following that. He's an absolute beast on the ground. His vision, his cut ability, his ability to break tackles and keep his balance is ridiculously high level. He's a great running back. There's always going to be that slight worry when you take him that this is the year he tears his ACL again. But I think he's been relatively healthy these past few years, only missed 4 games in total. That's quite the improvement over the kind of stigma he gets for being injury prone. He's relatively low red flag. He's a consistent producer, and he produced at a high level this past year, and I think he's going to do it again next year. On to my RB4, and I'm unsure if I were to tier this ranking, if I would put my RB4 up with 2 and 3, or if I would group him with 5 and 6. Right now, he's kind of in a tier of his own between that tier down from Christian McCaffrey, where it's just himself, and above the next 2 guys. But I have Nick Chubb as my RB4. I originally had him at 6. I said yesterday in my video that he is a top 6 lock for me, and he's here as the RB4. I am supremely confident in Nick Chubb's ability to finish as a top 5 running back. I'm not going to halt on that. I'm not going to cease in that. I am very, very confident in what he can do with the football. He was the RB9 in half PPR this year, the RB6 in points per game. He managed to rush for almost 1,100 yards in only 12 games, tacking on 12 touchdowns to go along with that. And if we're just speaking in terms of individual talent and what he can do with the football, he might be the best pure runner in the league. His mix of power, balance, agility, dude is strong as shit and elusive as hell. I know Derrick Henry's probably up there in that conversation with him, but man, Nick Chubb with the ball in his hands is truly a different animal. He's special. That's the only way to put it. He was 4th in yards per touch with 5.9, which is ridiculous for a guy who only had 16 receptions, considering that the value and general uptick in yardage per touch comes with targets and receptions. That just goes to show even further how dominant he is on the ground and just how explosive he is every time he touches the ball. He was 2nd in big runs, which is a run of 15 yards or more. He was 1st in juke rate, 6th in evaded tackles, 3rd in breakaway run percentage, which is the percentage of your runs that go for 15 yards or more, 3rd in yards created, and 1st in yards created per touch with 3.15. He averaged nearly 3 extra yards per touch after evading that first tackle. And it's not like he was playing with a bozo O-line. He was getting 3-4 yards out, making that first guy miss, and getting another 3 or 4 after that. This guy's an absolute monster. And keep in mind, he was at the top of these categories that aren't percentage-based, like big runs, like evaded tackles, playing only 12 games. If he would have played a full 16-game slate, or even 14, I have no doubt he would have been top 3, if not top 2, in pretty much all of them. The cherries on top of his insane ground production and advanced metrics, if you would, are that he saw new career highs in yards per route. I went up to 9.7 from, I believe, 7.5, and catch percentage in year 1 of Kevin Stefanski's system, which also has the 4th highest run percentage. So not only are they upticking his receiving game, we saw it a lot with screens. We saw it against Pittsburgh, get the guy the ball in a screen, on a handoff, on a slant, maybe not a slant, but a screen, handoff, any of that, and he can make magic. He also had the 4th overall O-line with the 2nd best run blocking O-line. So not only do you have an elite talent who creates magic anytime the ball is in his hands, has home run potential every time he touches it, he's going behind an elite O-line with a system that's catered around him and his position. It's an absolute match made in heaven for all parties involved, and even with Kareem Hunt here, I am incredibly infatuated with Nick Chubb going into 2021, my RB4. My RB5, a bit of a drop from where I initially planted my flag at top 3. A guy that not many people are going to be happy to see this high. He's a guy that I'm kind of famously a supporter of. He's helped me out, got an emotional attachment, but I try not to let that cloud my judgment here. I have Austin Ekeler as my RB5. I think there are some red flags, such as the lack of red zone targets and touches he got, as well as the loss of Anthony Lynn, who does tend to feed a workhorse, but I think his talent and production, as well as an improved situation in some ways, actually will keep him this high. I stated over and over again, my love for his dual threat abilities is almost second to nobody's. I am the #1 Austin Ekeler fan. It's on my Twitter, it's my handle. That means it's true, it's on the internet. In his full games with Justin Herbert, he was the RB7 on the year in points per game. He managed to have the 5th most receiving yards on the year for a running back, despite only playing 10 games. He was at about 432, I believe was the number. I know that's oddly specific for a guess, but it's just something that's coming to me because it's a strange stat to rank so highly in receiving yards despite playing just a little bit over half the season. If he kept his full game pace with Justin Herbert, he was on pace for 1,800 total yards, 100 receptions, 3 touchdowns, and 202 carries. Insane volume. That receiving work that he gets pretty much every week is going to give you an immense floor. He actually averaged the second most targets in his team when he was fully healthy with Herbert with 8. If you take that out, he's giving you a floor of pretty much 12 points per game on average of just receiving work. Anything he gets on top of that is an extra bonus. Obviously, you'd want more than 12 points per game from your RB5, but I'm just saying that's the baseline level. That's the minimum you're going to get from him, just purely off of his air production. He played in an offense with Justin Herbert that was mildly explosive at points, but they also ran the second most plays in the league. They were second in the league in running back targets. Even when Ekeler wasn't there, he had that goddamn many. And they were 8th in the league in total yards. Freeing him from Anthony Lynn and Shane Steichen will open back up his route tree and let him utilize his full abilities. The man can run a slant, he can run a wheel, he can run an out. He's basically a slot receiver that comes out of the backfield. He's elite through the air. It's probably his biggest strength because he's a fine runner, but what sets him apart from everybody else is his receiving ability. If this was standard, I'd have him a lot lower, but considering we're talking half PPR, I think it's more than fine to have him up here. So freeing him from Lynn and Steichen, as I said, kind of sucks losing a guy who loves to feed running backs that much, but what he can do through the air will finally be reback opened up, as well as the fact that he has this chemistry with Justin Herbert, who love to check down to him, who love to dump off to him. That's a quarterback-running back chemistry thing. That just shows that he has trust in him already in his first year, and as this offense develops going into next year, I see nothing but growth for them. I know I've gone a little bit more in-depth in other videos. I could have kept it short, but I figured I'd explain my reasoning for what's probably going to be a pretty controversial ranking at RB5. And for my RB6, I'm going to cut the video off here because I think I'm tacking on about 16, 17 minutes. Don't want to keep you guys here for too long. It's Jonathan Taylor, who I'm considering bumping down to 7 as I read this, but I think 6 is good. This is not something I expected to be talking to you guys about around week 7 last year, but here we are, and I'm honestly quite excited for Jonathan Taylor. For the first 10 weeks of last season, he really struggled and looked way more like Trent Richardson than I would have hoped, and way more than my Colts friends would have liked to admit and watch. But once week 11 hit, he broke out in an incredible way. That's a common thread through all those rookie running backs last year, most of them. Antonio Gibson, J.K. Dobbins, DeAndre Swift, Jonathan Taylor. They all kind of disappointed for that first 9 weeks of the season, then just hit the ground running in the second half. Whether it's getting acclimated to the offense after the COVID-shortened preseason, no real training camp, or just the coach's kind of hesitance to use them in a full role until it came to that time. Either way, second half breakout, common theme for the last year's rookie running backs. But going off of that breakout, I'm really confident and excited for what I saw in that. From weeks 11 to 17, he finished as the RB6. Actually, never mind. RB3 from 11 to 17, RB6 on the season, despite being the RB19 from weeks 1 to 10. Like I said, RB3 from 11 to 17, RB6 if you exclude week 17 because you don't do fantasy during that week because you're a normal human being. He showed the elite vision, breakaway speed, and just insane tackle-breaking ability that we all saw coming out of Wisconsin. He showed that workhorse ability, that 3-down back type of role. He was second in big runs. He had 12 total touchdowns. He was 8th in red zone targets and 10th in evaded tackles. Keep in mind that he spent over half the season in a weird 3-way committee with Nyheim Hines and Jordan Wilkins, who both suck, but they still get touches. But one of the most encouraging things isn't even about Jonathan Taylor himself. It's that he had the number 4 run blocking efficiency last year. So not only do we have this elite talent, who some people are calling generational, I won't comment on that. He's running behind an elite O-line with someone I can call generational, Quentin Nelson, kind of anchoring that line. That's only going to make things easier for him. But the main worry, and it kind of branched into the new news about Carson Wentz, is that he's not super involved in the passing game. He was 29th in the league in running back targets, but it is kind of complicated. Hines and Wilkins stole a lot, particularly Hines, and that role could stay even if Hines gets a little bit less work. And that was with Phillip Rivers, who is notorious for just dumping it off to running backs pretty much 20 times a game. It's almost ridiculous how much he does it. So you have Jonathan Taylor, who was smack in the middle of Nyheim Hines and Jordan Wilkins for targets, with a quarterback who's very favorable for receiving running backs. And I think they're going to hold on to Hines. Mack is almost all but gone, but I think Hines is going to keep his role, similarly to how J.D. McKissick will probably keep his role in Washington with Antonio Gibson. I think that's going to hamstring his receiving value a little bit, and this only gets more intriguing when you add Carson Wentz into the mix. He targets RBs far less than Phillip Rivers, and there were definite connection issues last year with Miles Sanders, although that was to the fault of both of them. I saw plenty of quackers from Wentz coming out of the backfield, but fucking Christ, Miles Sanders couldn't catch a cold some of the games. Really interesting situation there. Probably have blame on both of them, not just one or the other. I see Jonathan Taylor in a slightly altered Derrick Henry type of role. A few less carries, a few more targets, but overall their role and touch profile is going to look relatively similar. I had him at 3 initially because I was so enamored with the potential of what he could do in a 3-back role, but the more I looked and the more I talked about guys like Ekeler and Chubb and Dalvin Cook, I was like, I feel like I need to drop him to 6. I feel like this is still a good spot for him. I know people have him as the RB1 or 2. I'm not confident enough in his receiving ability to put him that high in a PPR or half PPR format, but I definitely think the potential is there for him to finish top 3, and I certainly wouldn't be surprised. So real quick to recap for y'all, the rankings: RB1, CMC, no surprises. 2 is Derrick Henry, RB3, Dalvin Cook, RB4, Nick Chubb, RB5, Austin Ekeler, and RB6, Jonathan Taylor. I hope you guys enjoyed. Rankings are ridiculously hard. I've been toiling away between who to put from 3 all the way down to 9 for hours at this point. It's an insanely hard thing to do because I feel like there's that top tier of guys, and then there's a lot of guys that can be really close together. There's a lot of moving parts this offseason. There are definitely 2 big names that were 3 big names actually that were left off of this list that you'll see next video. I have my reasonings as for why they were left off this list in that video. It will hopefully make sense. I feel like it can be a bit of a hot take or seen as intentionally trying to get attention by not having certain players in your top 5, top 6, but I'm trying to go off of a strong process that I think is correct in taking in the information we have available to us at this point. I don't want to make a ton of assumptions based on next year. I just want to go with what I have and what will likely happen. But just as of right now, if the season started, where would things shake out a bit? It's tough to do this, especially when we're so early in the off season. Draft hasn't even happened yet. A lot of retirements haven't even happened yet officially. Here's a hint. But I think I created a strong set of rankings. I feel like I can defend each spot pretty well. Hopefully you guys feel the same. If you don't, definitely leave your rankings in the comments. I definitely want to see them, where you agree, where you disagree, who you would have, why I'm an idiot for not having Ezekiel Elliott the RB2, all that type of shit. I love it. I love the discussion. I love to talk about it with you guys in the comments down below. I hope you enjoyed the video and have a nice night.